And here we are. It is the audio mullet, and we got Doug. And guess what? Mike Nelson is not back. But
oh, thank God.
but we do have a replacement Mike, a new guy. You guys, I don't know if you listen to the Conservatarians, a Ricochet podcast. You may know of him. You also may know of him if you know of Ricochet, because he's the editor-in-chief of Ricochet. This is Mr. John Gabriel. John Gabriel, say hello.
Hello.
That's good.
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan,
Mike, as you can see. So
you just need to do kind of like you have to speak very droll and just throw little one-liners here and there.
Right.
Monotone.
No. I'm a way bigger fan of John Gabriel than Mike Nelson anyways. So I've got way more John Gabriel going through my head every week than Mike Nelson, because I listen to all of his, all the podcasts, all the Ricochet guys that run through that think tank, that cult.
There's some good stuff on there. I love Jonah Goldberg. I love Bridget Fetisi.
I like her too. Jonah Goldberg, you know, I have to listen to The Remnant every week, but I hate him. I really hate the guy. And the more he's, I know I'm not supposed to make fun of Jonah because he's like a superstar, but this last week he had like a fellow anti-Trumper on behalf of all evangelicals. And while these evangelicals are being, evil for supporting Trump, and it was a huge collapse. It put me back in 2016 again. I'm like, what?
It's good preparation.
And I don't mind anti-Trumpers. I get it. The guy's an asshole, but it's always the guys that kind of cut down and shave down and parse around abortion that find the idea of Trump losing being something they can stomach and kind of relish. I'm just a single issue guy. That's all. I'm psycho about it.
Well, and what I didn't understand about that podcast, and this is a deep, deep cut. So listen to Jonah's podcast before listening to this one. Stop this where it is now.
I don't even know you guys are talking about. So
right. On Thursday, and it was lumping in all evangelicals as, well, evangelicals believe this, or the evangelical churches are preaching this. I'm like, just in my area, it's like most of the evangelical churches are radically different. And I've done more than my share of church hopping, jumping from place to place, and they're all totally different. There's some that are like totally progressive. So it's like they're kind of all over the place. But evangelical is such a broad term, and it covers so many different groups that disagree with each other.
And I've been an evangelical forever. I've been going to the most like normal evangelical churches for 20 years. I've never heard one of them say Bush's name from the pulpit or Trump's name from the pulpit ever. And I'm here in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. They went for Trump in the primary. Not a single one.
I've been to many churches. I've never heard politics spoken of from the pulpit, and it's characterized as if that's what goes on all the time. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've heard prayers for the president.
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah. Party. And during Obama, I heard prayers for him.
Yeah.
And so it's. Yeah, that was it, though. They never talked politics other than that, unless they were saying something to the effect of, if you're putting your hope in politics, you're missing the point.
So here's my big thing on where I think people get it wrong about Trump, just to go down this wild goose trail before we get on our subject, is if you lose sight of the context of when Trump rose up, it was never Trump just for Trump. I never supported him and went rah for him. It was always in context with versus Hillary, and even now, Trump versus that giant cult-like climate change seminar they just had is the alternate. Exterminate human beings to save the earth was kind of one of their premises. And if you're any kind of an evangelical and you don't start going rah Trump, go Trump, I don't get what makes you tick, because he is psycho. But it's like he looks sane compared to what he's up against. And it makes me want to defend him. It puts a knot in my stomach anytime we start criticizing him. So I go, man, I hope he doesn't weaken in the public discourse, because we got to win this election and get some judges, even though none of them will ever do anything about abortion. But it's like nothing, the alternate is going to do even less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I enter a voting booth, my immediate thought is, who will do the least damage? That's all I care about. When you're voting for the first time or two, it's just like, this guy's awesome. I love this Reagan guy. But when you're a jaded, burned out old man like I am now, it's just like, who's going to most leave me alone? Who's going to do the least damage? That's the person I'm going to end up picking.
Yeah. And he has to win. So I get it that if we ran, I want to run Reagan's resurrected body hooked up to a computer with his brain in a vat, freezing his little cryo brain. But that's a fantasy. So as soon as if we're gonna just run the perfect guy, I'm gonna do a write-in of Jesus Christ, and they're gonna go, but Doug, he's not running, and he's not gonna be present. Oh well, neither's your guy, neither's your perfect guy. So shut up. If we're talking about reality, it's gonna be Trump, or it's gonna be some psycho.
Yeah, in 2016, I could not bring myself to vote for Trump, and mostly because, I didn't mention this. I'm a war hero. I was in the Navy for one tour of duty, and I watched meters and dials on a submarine.
Thank you for your service. You did more than me, John.
More than both of us combined.
It was pretty heroic, so I try to brag about that. Well, when I joined, there was a Cold War. When I left, there wasn't. So I'm not taking all the credit, but
you were
I hate false humility more than anything.
But I like false humility.
Yeah.
Ethan also didn't vote for Trump.
We don't even have false humidity here in Arizona. But yeah, I was just like, I'm afraid what this guy's going to do with the military. I don't trust him on judges. And so, not to brag, but I voted for the stoner who didn't know what Aleppo was. I gave my vote to the rocket ship known as Gary Johnson, who, I don't know, in Arizona, 2% maybe. So
that was Libertarian candidate.
Yeah.
So now, facing the next election,
I thought this conversation was going to end, but that you just started. You just got into that. You're going to hear it go.
Okay, yeah. You know what? We'll go back to our topic. Ethan, get us back on track.
Well, I'm just
well, only because I've heard this conversation 1,000 times on 50 other Ricochet channels. We got to do something unique. So Ethan, go.
The topic that we had planned to talk about. Our friend John here. I believe you said you're writing a book on this topic.
Yes, I am.
On not being offended. But
it's very secret, so nobody talk about it.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. This is audio mullet.
Oh, good. Perfect.
Yeah, there's I think you might luckily get 900 people to hear this. We're lucky.
No, I've mentioned it to a couple people. It's much easier to talk about finishing the book than it is to actually put my butt in the chair and type.
True.
But
you can talk about it on a podcast.
It's done, at least.
Yeah, so it's about not getting offended or not being offended.
Yeah.
So I'll let you kind of let's start us off. What's your premise?
Well, I really noticed this because those of us on the right have seen for years the outrage brigades. They've been pretty much a constant, going back to kind of the first time I was politically engaged would probably be Reagan. And, you had die-ins and the no nukes marches and let's just give the evil Soviet empire whatever they want type people. And but I really started noticing it with social media, and even before Trump, a couple of years before Trump, a few conservatives started to do that more and more. Mm-hmm. They started, how dare you say that? I'm offended. I'm offended. And you see it actually too in the Christian world. It's like, I'm being persecuted for my beliefs. Well, sometimes you're just being a jerk and people are calling you on it.
Oh, that is me. I have a martyr complex, and I'm like, they're all after me because I'm a Christian, but really, I'm also an asshole. So I'm positive I have added to the offense of Christ in major ways. I'm so guilty.
But I just saw people, especially too, social outrage on the media is just endless, and it's just over stupider and stupider things. You don't like the packaging of cucumber water at Whole Foods, and you run a campaign to boycott Whole Foods. And for me, and I don't know if it's my background in reading or I'm half finished, so maybe it's that icy blood flowing through my veins. I don't understand why people get offended by anything, because you're not usually stopping someone else from doing something that you don't like. You're just driving yourself insane and making yourself totally unhappy by just kicking this dopamine rush of screaming at strangers online. So it doesn't make sense to me, and it makes your arguments bad, and it gets really emotional and things. It's like, okay, do you want to be happy? Maybe just don't log into Twitter or don't log into it when you're just outraged and furious about everything. But I think I'm weird in that way. So I'm just kind of putting down in a book, and I've written a couple op-eds I write for the local paper here. I live in the Phoenix area, so it's the Arizona Republic. And I was getting frustrated. But instead of being outraged, I wrote an op-ed about it and got a paycheck for it. So I did the right thing.
You're monetizing outrage.
Exactly.
So are you – but here's my thoughts, because when I first heard this subject, I go spruing out into a lot of philosophy. So are you saying just get a thick skin and maybe be apathetic about more things?
I would use apatheia in the Greek sense, which isn't apathy. It's just calmness. Okay. Equanimity is an old-timey word for
He was ready
that.
for that one.
Yeah, but it's all – that should be the title right there, Equanimity with John. But I think a lot of it came from when I started writing the book about it a few years ago. I started reading – okay, basically the whole story was – I want to sound really smart by saying I started reading the Epictetus and Seneca.
Wow.
But the reason I got into that is my eldest daughter was going to a charter school. And when I looked at her reading list, I was like, holy crap, I better catch up on my reading. Because I was just, when I was in high school, I was reading the cliff notes of whatever book was very important and vital to the Western canon. And then, between the binders of the book, I just put the cover on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something and read that instead.
I went to a public school in California, so we read the Cliff Notes even to the Star Wars novels.
Right. Exactly. So I started reading all these Stoic dudes, and I'm like, these guys are awesome. And some of it gets a little pie in the sky. But then that is actually, it was kind of weird because I knew a lot of like Christian background, Christian theology. And then I started reading philosophy. It's just like I never took any classes in college or anything on philosophy. I think I had to take one. So I took logic. That's effective. I won't have all these ponderous, bitter Germans yelling at me for a semester. Instead, I can get something useful out of it. But I started just reading philosophers, and in political debates, you'll see a lot of, references to Nietzsche or Kierkegaard or whatever. It's like, I just kind of want to know basically where they're all coming from. And so I really started early on with Stoic authors, and you can boil their entire philosophy down to every time you're faced with a situation, divided into one of two categories. Can I affect this? Can I not affect this? And then worry about it like crazy if you can affect it. Focus on that. Be outraged even. But if you can't affect it, just move on. You got really real stuff you can do. Instead of screaming at people online, I got 2 teenage kids. I've got a wife. I've got a job. I've got all these things. Those I can actually impact in some way. But just to see, okay, there's a company that released a shoe design that you don't like, and it's only available in North Dakota on every other Thursday. Okay, that doesn't affect me. I don't live there, and I don't care about what shoes I wear. I'm wearing the same shoes right now that I probably bought about 10 years ago. So it doesn't affect me. So, your emotional bandwidth is narrow enough, especially since I'm Finnish, that's, it's almost non-existent. So I'm not going to waste it on those things that I can have no effect over. And what I noticed when I started reading these dudes, I got way more chill when it came to, I'm on Twitter way too much. That's kind of the main social media I do. But people are always insulting you. And every time I write an article, oh, you're being paid by the Kochs, or you're being paid by Soros, if I happen to say something that sounds less conservative to them. And, it just never bothered me anymore because people insult you. You're just like, so a lot of people can give insults, but you don't need to accept them. And that sounds kind of new agey and stuff. But once you get to the point where you're like, this doesn't affect me, what Randy 69 2020 has a problem with the latest article. He has 14 followers. It doesn't affect my life. And that's what I tell these people. They want to engage me with a debate about something I wrote. I went, no, you don't understand. I wrote this like a week and a half ago, and I already got paid for it. I'm done. My work is done.
And I forgot about it 15 minutes.
Me? Not really. I wanted to get a paycheck, and I got that paycheck. You can believe whatever the hell you want.
So do you think in today's society where woke screaming actually can affect someone's employment if the masses scream loud enough? So one thing I've noticed since Trump got elected is I was used to screaming about pro-life all alone, and there was no mass to join. It's like, man, you're a freak, and I'm going like, am I the only one that sees the value of the unborn? And then suddenly everyone's being more vocal about it. Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro and a bunch of Ricochet guys, a bunch of Republicans. And suddenly it's cool to be more vocal about it. That's one thing that I saw as a good part of outrage culture is my side is starting to show up more on the outrage side, even if it's like, hey, free market capitalism and stuff like that. If we go the stoic way and I go, well, I'm not really going to affect the abortion debate. I mean, I'm not really going to free the slaves. You know, the Wedgwood artists all got together and they made those Wedgwood plates that showed black men with the chains on them saying, am I not also a brother? They used culture to move people's minds. Is there a legit side of culture where the needle is moved by, say, 1,000 people screaming on Twitter? If it's about a right cause, I'm saying, is it worth joining that dog pile?
Right. Being active is very important, and which is the bad news because then I have to move my butt off the couch and accomplish something in life. But no, if you care passionately about the issue, and you can affect it, you can affect it in a small way with your vote. Showing up to a march if a group is doing, I did that years ago, did a pro-life march back, at my college. So that was not a popular position. I was fine with that because I don't care. But that's something that you actually can affect, I would say. And so, get out there and, blow your horn about the issue that you care about. But being outraged about it, that huge just emotional investment, you don't need to do that. And also, too, when people on the other side are getting very emotional and you're just chill about everything, especially like in a public debate setting, everybody's going to side with you because, wow, that other person's a crazy person. So
Richard Lowry wins more debates by being chill.
Well, I think it's just a lot more if you want to change, let's say, push the needle on the abortion issue. The thing to do is just being calm, collected, rational, and the other person is just screaming and yelling and chanting, and they won't ultimately win a debate that way. They might win a media cycle because media loves to see the people. Just the other day in Canada, Chick-fil-A opened up in Toronto, and so these very polite Canadians, about 14 of them, did a die-in in front of it, and they were yelling at people. And meanwhile, the line of streaming Canadians pouring into the double doors of Chick-fil-A was just endless. It was like
stepping over the bodies.
Israelites leaving Israel, or leaving Egypt, just pouring through the doors. And meanwhile, these 14 people with signs laying on their chest. And it's just like, okay, you might win a media cycle saying, wow, these people are really woke, good for them. But the voting public just thinks they're idiots. And it's like, look, I just want a chicken sandwich. I have a very limited time here on my lunch break. Give me my damn food.
Ethan?
So much to dive into. Well, I think because I thought that so there's a difference between being offended and outraged.
Yeah. And that's the thing that you have to kind of figure out for yourself, because personally, I'm not really offended by anything. I'll disagree with someone. If someone says, hey, I think abortions, I'll make up a figure. Say someone's running for the Democratic Party and they really care about the environment. So they say it's okay to employ eugenics to lessen the population of the third world. Wild idea, I know, but just pretend there was a very old screaming man who believes something like that.
No one would be that insane. Nobody.
I know. And running for election? Come on, that doesn't even make sense. But if such a crazy socialist screamed something like that from one of his three homes, The thing that I would ask, I wouldn't be offended by it. I'd just be, that guy's an idiot. I'm not offended. I'm not like personally harmed by it. I'm mostly thanking myself that the people on the opposite side of the issues are so stupid that they would say something so idiotic that no one in America, well, 95% of America hates, that he would go out there and say it. So, being outraged and offended are different things. The main thing about just not getting outraged or having a quick trigger finger when it comes to, I'm personally offended by this. I can't believe I'm in the Safeway and they're playing this horrible song. To be honest, I'm very offended by the music list at my local Safeway. However, do you want to be happy? If you want to be happy, just don't expect much from the world around you. Don't get totally offended when someone has a different idea. And you don't need to take offense. You got your eyes on bigger things. You're focusing on the things you can actually affect, whether they're small things like, hey, I'm going to make sure to spend extra time with the kids tonight. When you have teenagers, I don't recommend that. Or it could be some major issue like, hey, I want to have, better occupational licensing rules, or I want to make sure that, my personal state changes their abortion law in this way, and I'm going to show up to a committee hearing. I'm going to actually do something about it rather than screaming at strangers.
Yeah,
but screaming at strangers is so easy.
Yeah. And you can think, and I think that's a big problem with social media and why the woke brigades on Twitter are very effective on Twitter, but not at the voting booth, usually, at least the more radical ones. And it's because if you yell at a perfect stranger on Twitter about something, you're like, there, I did something. This homeless problem is so bad, I blame Trump because, I don't know, he doesn't house more people at Mar-a-Lago. Okay, you yell at a stranger, my work is done. I've helped the homeless today. No, you just release some endorphins by screaming at people you don't know, and homeless people are still homeless. Why don't you get off your butt and help them?
So the offense culture is largely like an armchair activism or a placebo where you feel like you're doing something and really you haven't moved the needle.
Right. And there's actually a lot of academic studies to that effect. If you spend time just like actually the Babylon Bee has done this,
We do a lot of studies.
Speaking of,
who is running the freaking Babylon Bee?
Yeah, what hack would they hire like Ethan Nicole to throw down that scold bait?
Yeah, it had the typical hipster standing in front of it might have been your Photoshop, Ethan, standing in front of a homeless person tweeting, This is so offensive that this man's homeless. Thanks a lot, Trump. And then moving on, it's like, there, I fixed that problem. It's like, no, why don't you just give the dude a sandwich? Give him a delicious Chick-fil-A sandwich.
The man was injured. He needed attention, and the guy.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. More Good Samaritan.
He was
story.
Homeless too, I think. But it says a modern Good Samaritan stops next to injured homeless man and tweets how this is all Trump's fault.
So in a way, John, this offense culture, you're talking about. This is a lot of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube where I think we're gaslighting ourselves because we choose who to follow. So I can surround my feed with angry screamers that I really like their takes on things because it's just a little bit risque and titillizing to watch them, destroy the left. It's so fun to watch them burn them with a perfect meme. But really, I'm just creating a feed where I'm preoccupied by it. It gives me the illusion of doing something. My stomach's in a knot all day, and my anger is rising up against the opposition, and even that isn't helping anything.
Yeah, exactly. And it gets to, I think a lot of it is our current culture of feelings mattering so much more than facts. And, you could convince someone, read Mere Christianity, and it makes a good argument that, Christianity is probably right, and here's why, and this is just reasons why. Yeah, but they're icky. Yeah, but I don't like them. Yeah, but Chick-fil-A, they make hate chicken.
Yeah.
So it's just, and that's why it's so difficult to have an argument in good faith with anyone on the other side, even people on the other side within our own circle, like fellow Republicans or say fellow Christians or something like that. People you can give them all the rationale in the world, and they will say, but I still don't like it. It makes me feel unsafe. And if you want to live your life like that, fine, but you're going to make yourself miserable. And I don't say don't get offended, don't get outraged. I don't do that to, this will take a weapon out of the left's playbook. No, it might actually make them happy. When they go to Thanksgiving, they don't need to fight with Uncle Joe who's wearing a MAGA hat. They don't need to scream about Obamacare. They don't need to read talking points from Think Progress. Oh, rest in peace, Think Progress, by the way. They just
Yay. Liberal cheers. Yeah. Yeah, you go down, sucker. Let me go Photoshop up some memes to really slam them right now. I'm going to work on that 12 hours a day
instead of code.
Yeah, learn to code instead of work on stuff that brings food into my family's mouth.
Exactly.
Work on that all day.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is just you're not really changing anything by being in a perpetual state of outrage, and you're actually making yourself worse. You're making your causes, you're less effective to help your causes because you're just all wrapped up in the emotional state. And get out there and do something. It's not like it's easy to take on something like abortion or so many other issues, especially social issues going on in this country. It's really difficult to move the ball on it. So why don't you put your little bit of effort towards something that would actually help, even if it's just like cutting a check, say to me, someone who's really on the vanguard of fixing this nation. Venmo me. That'll be in the show notes. My Venmo.
That's always a wise move. So I'm thinking of the philosopher J.P. Moreland is one of my favorite philosophers of the last 20 years who really combated relativism. And one thing he said.
He was great on Match Game, by the way. Oh, no, that's J.P. Morgan. That's
J.P. Morgan.
Yeah, okay.
Morgan
gotcha.
or Morgan. Yeah, she lifted her shirt up on the Gong Show. Too.
Yeah.
J.P. Moreland, who probably isn't as smart as J.P. Morgan, he said regarding relativism, we always tend to relativize the other person's absolutes and make absolute, what we believe. So, for instance, to me, environmentalism is very low on my concern list. Drinking straws, low on my concern list. Even women's access to quote unquote reproductive health, right, would be low on my concern list. Using proper pronouns, it's low. It's getting higher just so I can eat, just so I can work, but it's low on my concern list. But to the other side, right, when you see them all going psycho over what they believe is an absolute, right, and then they relativize what I find sacred, like for them, the rights of the unconstitutional rights of the civil rights of the unborn is low on their concern list. Businesses being able to freely operate and, that might create some pollution or create jobs that help lift things up. That might be low on theirs. What about the idea that overall both sides are relativizing or making optional what the other side finds an absolute? Is there a reciprocity, John, to the idea of offense, that maybe we don't have the empathy to see that the other person has erected this thing as an absolute, which we find in the big world of things optional, and therefore we're really saying what I believe is right, and I do believe what I believe is right, and the other side is just saying what I believe is right, and when you offend the environment, it's like you're making fun of Muhammad to a Muslim, and that's why they're offended.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. Climate is a perfect example of this, because if you were locked in a room doing nothing but and I pity this example, watching CNN or something, you would think that the entire world was just rioting in the streets for climate change and, doing a little pasta noodle fan art for Greta Thunberg or whatever her name is. And if they do polling, I know there was recently polls, what are the most important issues to you American voters? Climate change was way at the bottom. When they asked, are you concerned about climate change? It was like 75% is like, oh yes, of course. Okay, what do you base your vote on? Climate change is like at 3% or something like that. There is this almost religious aspect to that issue. And yeah, I think if you actually want to change the minds of your opponent, having empathy for their view, even if you think it's disgusting or silly or whatever, having empathy for it goes a long way. And that's something like environmentalism for me. I grew up in Arizona, and it seems like in the Mountain West in general, and it's probably similar in Oregon, Ethan, I don't know, but all the conservatives here were very pro-conservation, not environmentalists, but very pro-conservation. You know, Phoenix has a lot of mountains in town, and you see when you go out to LA, every, hillock has 8,000 mansions on top of it. And here they just say, nope, we're not building on the mountains. You can build up like 20% of the way, and that's it, because the mountains are kind of everybody's, and it gives like a visual break when you're in the city. You can see mountains and say, oh, okay, I'm not locked in this endless urban nightmare. And that has been a conservative position, kind of the Barry Goldwater perspective, protect the land. But when it comes to worshiping the creation, which is where so much of the left is now, I'm just like, this is ridiculous. But I think instead of, being offended by them, just say, hey, I think you're worshiping the creation, and here's some science facts to puncture your balloon a little bit, saying all scientists believe X. No, they actually don't. And if you actually want to be effective in a debate, and we don't have time to be effective to every Yahoo on Twitter, but if you have a good friend who's like, look, we're all going to die in 12 years or 17 months or whatever the dire projection is this time, having empathy for the position is fine. I can have empathy, talking about faith issues. I've worked with tons of Muslims. Some were non-committed to it. Some were totally committed to it. And I was just like, I could totally empathize with their view. I disagreed with it, but the reason we were friends is I could go, oh, I can kind of see that. And actually, my wife and I, once our kids got into the school system, during elementary school, my girls' best friends were other Muslim girls. They were the Christian girls. The Muslim girls, we have a lot of people working for high tech out here. They might come from Pakistan, Egypt, India, wherever. But they come here to make their money. Their business sent them here. And it was hilarious because all the very few Muslim parents in the school wanted their kids to hang out with our kids. And we asked them why once. And they said, well, you guys believe in God and you're conservative, and this culture is insane. It's like a sewer. Stuff the teachers are doing. So they were just like, they wanted to hang out with us all the time. They're like, oh, you guys are a good influence on our kids. And it was pretty funny because one time my sister, who's kind of moderate Democrat, pro-Obama, but she's voted Republican occasionally, kind of things. And, she believes the right thing, very kind of upper middle class. And it was so funny because she came to one of my girls' parties, and it was like 75% of the other attendees were Muslim girls. And she was just like confused and shocked. She's like, but wait, you're a conservative.
Yeah.
All the dinner parties at my house, it's just white on white on white. And it's like, yeah, because we have something in common with these families in that it's just like, no, there's something more important than politics or school or the environment. We both at least share that there's a creator and there are moral precepts that we should follow. And we ended up, it was pretty fun. We ended up having a lot of great times with that family, and they would bring up like religious issues. And, frankly, just they were appreciative that we were following something.
And the kids really had a good time when they during the birthday, when they threw the piñata of the gay man off the roof. They all really
that really put a damper on things.
Hooray!
It was kind of funny, though, because some of the girls were very kind of strict and conservative and some weren't. And I'm a dog fanatic. At the time, we had a corgi.
Oh, yeah, they're weird about dogs.
They're weird about dogs.
Well, a lot of the kids love them, though.
And the potbelly pig. You had to keep the potbelly pig in the basement.
Right. But some of the girls would play with the dog, and other girls wouldn't touch the dog. And the ones who would play with the dog would rub the dog all over and then chase the other more conservative.
Oh, that's funny.
Muslim girls around. It's like, I'm going to get the dog on you. It was like one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Raise your burqa up so I can touch you. I'm going to get my dog hands all over you.
Right.
Ethan.
Oh, boy.
What are you offended by? What's the big deal?
I was curious to think about, what does make us offended? Like something that comes from outside of our bubble that we almost never have to deal with. So like if somebody suddenly was to defend, pedophilia or some deep race, like real racism, like blatant racism, like let's hang these blacks or something. Like, oh my gosh, what? Like that would be, you'd suddenly be offended. And I think that one thing that equips Christians, especially Christians that don't live in deeply Christian bubbles, is that equips us to not get as offended as most people, is that we're constantly in a world where our ideas are not being validated by every single thing. And ideas that we find offensive or should be offended by, we're so used to being among them that we've learned to kind of let it bounce off of us. Like there's a girl on Twitter right now I saw was, saying that this new Joker movie is pro-incel or some kind of thing, and she's all offended and they need to stop it. I don't know, whatever it was, but just the idea that I would like be so offended by a movie because it doesn't fit in line with what I think ideologically should be happening in a movie is so hilarious to me as a Christian that I could ever even demand that of anybody because it so rarely happens.
We're used to having our offense just completely ignored. So when someone else comes to me and says I'm offended, I'm like, well, now you know how I feel. Good.
And I made the point that if every time you look at a piece of art and you're trying to figure out if it falls in line with everything you believe, and if it doesn't, it needs to be destroyed. You don't really like art. You like validation of your ideas. And I think you
especially see that in comedy now, which drives me crazy because since I was a little kid, watching daytime talk shows, anytime a comedian was on, I'd stop everything I'm doing, whether they're good, bad, whatever. And now it's kind of funny. I call it, you always notice if you tell a joke to a very committed progressive, there's always a pause. So you say the joke and then their eyes turn into those little Apple spinning wheels on your computer when it's trying to download something, because they first need to process the joke. Am I allowed to laugh at this?
Yeah.
Can I laugh at this? And then if they decide they can, they'll go, ha ha ha. Anyway, then they'll go on to something else. And it's like, what a tedious way to live. I went a few years ago, I snuck into a Netroots Nation conference in Detroit, hardcore progressive activists everywhere. And they had a seminar on comedy. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a rip.
This is going to be good for the book. It was a bunch of professional comedians, professional loosely described, telling the crowd what they're allowed to laugh at and what they're not allowed to laugh at. And there was no laughter throughout the thing. Everybody was stone-faced throughout the thing. And they're like, yeah, we got to get back to winning the culture. And they were complaining constantly about how these terrible conservatives are winning comedy. They're actually making people laugh. But obviously that is not the point of comedy, to make people laugh. So it was, I was going to just mock the whole thing in an article, but I ended up just doing a completely straight reporting of it. And people were like, this is a parody. No, it's not a parody. It's Snopes fact check it. They love me. But it was just, they were deadly serious about comedy, and because it's for social activism and social change. We saw that recently with the Netflix special of Dave Chappelle trying to cancel him. And he just said, well, I've canceled you, so I don't care. Yeah. So is the right as tender, like a picked scab, as the left? So if someone says something bad about Trump, like, isn't he stupid, and Sharpiegate, are there a bunch of offended right-wingers, or as much so that it is a culture-wide problem that everyone is getting their offense detector set to high, or is it, and am I just projecting and thinking that it's worse on the left? Because it used to be like during the moral majority in the 80s, all the Christians were like, the church lady represented us. And now the church lady, I mean, she's over there with those secularist comedians saying, everything has to be correct and you can't use certain words and you can't tell certain jokes. You can't, about a great many more subjects, you can't just make fun of women. Like that used to be like half of the comedian's routine was just about women being women. Well, so is it hitting the right to the same degree, John?
I don't think it's as bad on the right, but you make a good point. It used to be, kind of the church lady, the PMRC, let's put labels on heavy metal albums and hip hop albums. And just being offended by things and not wanting other people to listen to it. I'm probably an outlier on this, but if someone tries to insult me or says something offensive about my faith, my beliefs, first off, as conservatives, we're used to it. Our entire lives we've had that, just constantly. Christians are bad, conservatives are heartless. and all that. But if someone tries to insult me, I don't feel badly about myself. I just conclude, wow, that guy's an idiot. I can't believe they're missing out on all my brilliance and wisdom. So, yeah, that's very arrogant. I'm sure a lot of people think it is. But I've thought through these issues, and I think I'm right. And if some humorless idiot attacks me for being a white cisgendered male, I look at, wow, they're a depressing person. That's really bad for them. They must be a really miserable person. So it's like I don't take personal offense because I don't feel threatened. It's not like on Twitter you'll mention something about, hey, I remember a while ago, youngest daughter was in the hospital, and I usually don't put personal stuff on there, but I was like, hey, if any of you want to pray, really appreciate it. And then of course you get the atheists who have Google searches for anyone mentioning God. Well, prayers don't work, man. And,
saying you'll pray for someone means you won't do anything.
Right. Have you heard of the flying spaghetti monster? LOL. Just like, I've heard every atheistic argument by sophomore year of high school. They haven't changed. And I've processed all those, and I went, oh yeah, but I still don't believe in atheism. So my faith is fine. So I think when you're confident in your positions, you're fine with people, like Muslims coming to your house, having your Democrat family members, because, if they want to debate me on these or talk about it, I can definitely do that. But I'm not worried at all. I'll change my mind if they have better evidence. But so far, my whole life, I've been hearing garbage as evidence, and it doesn't make any sense.
Well, as a fine artist, I've been submerged in homosexuality my whole life. Like that's all we've had is homos laying all over each other in the art department. We were very comfortable, very close, and I'm like a super conservative guy. So I've never found it that offensive because it's kind of bland and boring, even in their very bizarre, over-sexualized culture. That I just kind of shrug and go, oh, those are gay. So I'm not offended by it. I just think it's wrong.
Right. And that's a big difference between being offended by it and just going, that's not the healthiest way to live.
Yeah.
That's not what you were made for. You were made for so much more. And I wish you could see my perspective. I'll chat about it if you want, but constantly hitting the fading couch and go, oh, can you believe how transgressive they are? That's what they want you to do. They want you to do that. And now if you're, doing, especially in the art world, if you're doing some kind of a pro-gay piece, to be transgressive, that could be the least transgressive thing you could do. You have all the major brands sporting the rainbow flag during Gay Pride Month.
Yeah. So I would do this
so
test.
Non-transgressive. I pity you if you think that's a rebellion because that's corporate now.
I would do this test among my friends who would always, they'd blaspheme God's name or tell really bad jokes against my religion. So I go, and they'd go, I'll bet you find that offensive. And then I'd just go, instead of using goddamn or something, I would say, Jesus died for your sins and he's the only way to God. And if you don't accept him, you burn in hell forever, including the best Jew you know. And they would go like, like just go completely offensive. I go, now you know how I feel. In other words, just saying a straight up gospel, a pretty conservative evangelical normal has been pretty normal since the beginning. They completely freak out in a way as if you said the way that they say "God damn" doesn't make me jump up and down and scream. And that's a old Chestertonian quote too. That the idea of grasping the old virtues has all of the flavor of a vice today. It has all the kind of deliciousness of a vice, that just saying normal or even going to a bunch of woke liberals and just saying, the free market, it does more to end poverty than all of your welfare programs is so offensive and screamy to them that they never mind saying the most of things where they're trying to be offensive. And I can just kind of make kind of normal conservative statements that they find outrageous. And we're kind of getting culturally trained to not be as offensive about what we say. Right. Like I always have to carve my truth. And why does every Hollywood person I work with just shout from the top of the buildings what they think of Trump, but I can't say what I think of, say, Hillary or or whoever is running for. I was out here I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I was out here on VeggieTales when Trump won in 2016. I was the showrunner. And this is in Tennessee. Half my crew showed up the next day. This is the DreamWorks Netflix project. Half my crew came into work and were just ice cold, mourning, real quiet. And I wasn't allowed to walk down the halls going, yeah, our boy, our guy smoked you, put your face in the mud, baby Hillary. Oh yeah, he won. I wasn't allowed to do that. But if Hillary won, they would have been able to come into my crew. This is on VeggieTales, an alleged evangelical show in conservative Tennessee. There would be no counseling services offered to me. Like they were all big DreamWorks announcement throughout all of my crew. Like if you need a day off, you can take the day off. If you need grief counseling, call this person. Culturally, why are they allowed? They're given so much more room to be offended, and their offense is treated like it's an objective truth. And mine is treated like just a personal, bizarre choice, like, hey, get over it.
I think
I think that's because they have the commanding heights of the culture. So they set the agenda for the culture. They don't have it in Washington, D.C. right now. They don't have it in politics. When you actually look at the powers, especially going to like state legislatures, governorships, and the like, we have all the power basically in reaction to them controlling the commanding heights of the cultural conversation. But yeah, just pointing that out to them freaks them out. I remember back, and this was years ago, I ran a team of graphic designers, and there were a few young female graphic designers. And after Bush too was reelected, this one designer, great person, really sweet girl, she was sobbing at her desk the next day. And I'm like, can I help? I don't like emotion, so make emotion stop. What can I do to stop emotion? And that's what she said. She's like, the country's over. Bush won. The country's going to end. He's going to, it's going to be Handmaid's Tale or whatever the parallel was in that era. And I kind of had to talk her down. I'm like, just so you know, we had Clinton for a couple terms. Now we're going to have Bush a couple terms, and the next president will probably be a Democrat. And then it'll be a Republican. It's like,
and then she cried again. She cried again when you said it would be a Republican.
Republican.
By the way, I was during that second Bush reelection. I had created Cat Scratch. I was working at Nickelodeon, and 3 of my crew members went home crying during the second Bush. And I remember having my heart. In fact, I was there with Ethan and Mike Nelson. My heart was in my throat when Obama won both times, especially the second time.
Second time was worse, yeah.
Because the media kind of got us to think that Romney had a chance. And I just remember going like, well, let's watch it all swirl down the drain. But I didn't freak out and cry. I wasn't offended. I was kind of shocked that Trump won. I'm going, wow, America, I guess you still got some kick left in you. Maybe we're not.
I think, yeah, with Romney losing, whenever everybody saw the Obamacare debacle and saw him employ these different socialistic programs, it revealed to me, hey, I can't put my faith in politics. I can't put it in policy. I was working at a think tank at the time. And, my faith cannot come from there. As important as those issues are, keep working at them, keep chugging away. But I was just like, wow, the American people disagree with me, and they're kind of cool with socialism in a lot of ways. Oh. And Trump was the opposite reaction to that. But it was clarifying for me in that it actually, in a weird way, I ignored politics for the next couple of months and spent more time reading old works, Chesterton, for example.
Yeah.
Now, realizing the bigger picture and just saying, okay, John, this politics is not the end of the world. I think if your perspective is godless, even if you claim to be a Christian or any other religion, but you're living as a functional atheist almost, you think that Washington will save you. You think that the strong man on the white horse will save you. I think people on both sides need to realize, no, they're just going to yell about crap in D.C. for 4 years, and then it'll be a different guy yelling about crap for another 4 years. Yeah. And just realizing there are fundamental truths that do not change based on the news cycle, based on which politician is up and which politician is down. So kind of keep it keep politics in its box as not the most important thing in your life, because it really shouldn't affect you that much. There's a lot more important things. I can do a heck of a lot more good working with youth around my area than I can by, I don't know, writing a sick burn of someone on Twitter or writing an outraged article. If I help out some, poor kid, that's going to make a vastly more important impact on the world around me than will, I don't know, getting rid of bump stocks on guns. It's just like, here's a disillusioned kid, and this old, incredibly handsome man in the Arizona area spends some time and just hangs out and teaches him some life skills because he doesn't have a dad. That has more of an impact in the real world than just screaming about crap.
So being offended is to just have an emotional response. Is it okay to be offended when objective moral truth is largely disregarded by culture? I mean, is it just is what you're saying? Is it real? Look, it's just a tantrum, and if you really want to do something to change it, but you can still be offended, right, about things that you hold sacred, like the disregard of family, or if someone makes sweeping statements that are lies about cops or guns, and you see it as some bigger grab of freedom. Do you still think it's healthy for people to be offended, or is this the true stoic that even that you should just go straight to pragmatism of what am I going to do with this, and it's not going to do any good, so why even feel it?
Yeah, I'm very non-emotional. It's the Scandinavian roots, I think. So a lot of that is just me. It's just like I just immediately go to, okay, what can I do about this? How can I do it? You can be offended about anything, and especially if you're going to get offended, try to limit it to the big issues. That's a lot more important. But I guess looking at things philosophically, what I do is if the world is attacking these eternal truths, I go, hey, Jesus said they were going to do that. Yeah. So why am I surprised? Why am I like, oh my gosh, these people who don't believe in God are actually, they don't like God and they don't like his truth. It's just like, this is to be expected, make change where you can kind of a thing. And I think with all this too, some people, I've chatted with some friends and they're like, yeah, but man, it's been a long week and work has been really, really tough. So it's great to get on Twitter and just yell at people for a while. I'm like, okay, look, if you want to do it, do whatever the heck you want. But is it ultimately making you happy? And I say that to the liberals as well, who oppose me and everything. It's just at some point, it's just like, okay, focus on what makes you happy, not what makes you angry, because that's going that's going to help you grow as a person and make you more effective at anything you do than just screaming at strangers nonstop, because it's kind of like the joy of a quick sin. It's easy and it feels good in the moment. And then you're like, oh man, what did I do that for? So it's kind of the same kind of thing with screaming and yelling and being upset. I think part of this comes with age, but just being a Christian, I was raised Lutheran, but we were kind of iffy. And then I had kind of the salvation experience when I was 15, I think I was. And since then, it's just been a long time realizing, yeah, a lot of people are offended that I'm a Christian. And if they find out, if I ever, and I'm, keep to myself mostly, but if they find out I'm going to church, they'll mock me for it. From my days in the Navy till now, it's just a lot of people. And the only reason they're mocking and attacking me for it is they feel very threatened by it. And they're acting like, oh, I'm too smart and you believe in old crazy old fairy tales. And I'm like, it's weird that I'm not offended that you're an atheist or whatever, and even insulting, but you're very upset of the fact that, when you all go out after work and, are on your 13th beer and I've nursed 2 beers and then it's just like, I'm heading home. People will get really offended that. And it's just like, look, I got stuff to do, and I will have some fun, but I know I don't want to be drunk because I got to drive home, and that wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. So it is very revealing if people get very emotional, offended by things that have no effect on them.
Well, I think it ties
if you're
in.
hanging out in an atheistic office and people are freaking out just because you didn't say anything, you didn't do anything. They just find out you're a Christian and they freak out about it. It's just like, that's really revealing about you. Why is this upsetting you? Because if you really believe there's no God, why on earth do you care that I believe? If I believed in the Easter Bunny, that wouldn't offend you, but this does. Why is that?
I think one reason that when you're a Christian, I mean, there are Christian bubbles that get a little utopian with their view of Christianity, which I think the Make America Great Again thing has the danger of being that, where you think we're going to create a Christian right-wing utopia here. But I think generally the utopian people who think they're creating the perfect world are on the left, because they're secular, so they think that anything that isn't a step in that direction is offensive by default. So if you don't think that way, if you're thinking that, I think Thomas Sowell calls it the tragic view of life, that we're never going to be perfect and we're all struggling with sin, and that we're all going to disagree and it's never going to be perfect. So you're looking for what's the best way of handling that situation. I think that Christianity in general, we have the idea that the earth, the stars, all this stuff, God made it. It'll be done when he's done with it. This world will end when it ends. There will always be sin. And in fact, it's going to get worse. There will always be opposition. Just being able to accept that makes you equipped to not get offended as often as somebody who every step, just the fact that somebody has the wrong belief shows them how far humanity is from evolving into an enlightened species. They're trying to fast track that. They're trying to get us all.
I also hate evolution. So there. So I like any kind of a sidebar, but at the idea that we're not progressing.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is the progressive mindset is one of the American version of it would be continuous improvement.
Yeah, that's why they're so triggered by Trump. Right?
You're on the wrong side of history, and to me, it's just like, well, first off, ultimate history, starts with the creation, and
we're at what side of eternity? Yeah,
but by now
history doesn't have a side.
We're supposed to be on the top end. Like you only progress according to progressives. So like you're always getting better. And yet like choke porn is kind of a new development. So like that's what we reached at our peak. Is choke porn. I'm just saying.
I think every sexual act that you could imagine probably has been around since like old times.
Not skull effing. That's got to be newish. Or I just think of like the grossest stuff that people like marrying dolphins. Like there's a woman who married a dolphin in the UK or married a bridge. I'm like, this is the peak of progress. This is where we ended up. Really?
I'm on
progress working.
I'm on board with the idea that progress is a sham, but the weird examples are weird.
It's a sham because we're so obviously, at the very least, de-evolving in certain areas as fast as we're evil. Like people are abandoning, let's say getting married and having children. That's the big peak. Yeah. We're not going to reproduce now. That's a Darwinian.
I love the idea that progress is not having
kids. That's a big benefit.
Like, progress.
We're going to let all the Muslims reproduce, and we're not going to. That's the big advance.
Yep.
Hope it works well. Well, so Ethan, what about me always being so offensive to you? Maybe you just need to lighten up a little. It's really, you're not going to change me.
I'm not offended. I just want to try to make sure people listening are not thinking I'm like endorsing what you're saying.
Oh yeah, see, because you can't.
If I just
sit
here silently, it sounds like I'm like going like, yeah.
Ethan and the Babylon Bee endorse every single thing I've thought or said for the last 10 years. And if you guys have unsubscribed or unfollowed, then you're just your weak liberal sauce. You're weak, over offensive little leftist church ladies.
I just think that the lewd acts that you listed, I would guess, have been around since like cave times. Because you're sitting around, you got no internet, you got no movies, you got nothing to do. You probably get really creative with your sexual practices.
It was probably all missionary style back then. John, what's your opinion on me insulting our audience? Is that a good way to get more subs?
It's the best way to get more subs. One thing I will say, though, is when I created the podcast that I do on Ricochet.
The Conservatarians, guys, that you have to listen to. It's one of my favorites.
Thank you.
Conservatarians.
But the first thing we do is, at the time, Ricochet had several very kind of think tanky podcasts, and all of them you could just old dudes and wearing Brooks Brothers talking very gravely seriously about issues.
Yeah, it's like the Heritage Group on accounting was my
right. Yeah, exactly. And, long, 3-hour podcast on occupational licensing or something. And what I did before picking a co-host or anything, is I said, who do I want to hate this podcast? And I created a list, and it was mostly kind of that person that I imagined sitting in DC who wouldn't like this. And, I think our podcast is certainly not great art, but there's some old quote that great art divides. And that's what it's just like, I want to appeal to a niche who likes this kind of thing. So don't try to please everybody. Just try to get a few rabid supporters, and it'll grow from there. And that's proved to be true. I think if you try to appeal to everyone, it's really boring. You become NPR.
Our podcast's here to stay. Is this the future? Just as an expert of a guy who's you curate so much material and so much of it goes through you. You're the bottleneck. What is our podcast going to evolve going forward, or is your plan to continue to expand, double down, keep marketing this stuff? It's getting bigger, doing better.
I think it'll continue to change and continue to grow. What's interesting is podcasting now is like the boom that talk radio was, say, late 80s is probably when Rush went national. It's a place where you can actually talk in depth about issues, or even, if it's a podcast, interviewing comedians or people in the culture, just for entertainment. It's just vastly more interesting, especially if you have some kind of niche interest. Like I've always been a history nerd. The more ancient, the better. And once I discovered these history podcasts, oh my gosh, my poor kids, when they hear the intro music to the history of Byzantium, they're about to cry, like, please, Dad, no. But I'm like, they're talking about Igor the Bulgar Slayer this episode. This is fun.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. You can kind of find that small group of people who are into it, and then it'll expand from there.
Sure. Ethan?
Yeah. No, I think podcasts it's definitely that. Because they can be so niche, the sky's the limit with the amount that can be out there. and that you can talk in depth. Oh, I'm losing my voice, and I haven't talked this entire podcast. Anyway, well, we didn't really have a second thing we went into, but I think we're out of time, and it was pretty fun. I think it was getting into... I wasn't offended by it. Were you?
I wasn't terribly offended.
Kind of offended.
You're deeply offended, deeply creased. And now we just know I'm so burnt that no matter who's offended, I've learned not to care. That's the big thing is you're offended. Okay. Well, maybe we're not, and I'm going to bring up a whole other subject, but maybe we're not supposed to know this much about each other. Like, we're in everyone else's heads now. If I hear what you have to say about the Star Wars trilogy, I'm going to be like, I'm going to learn a level of granularity about you where I'm just like, it's like he just pulled his pants down at the Thanksgiving dinner table. It's
That's
like, why would he even?
I don't understand at all. People getting offended when they start talking about Star Wars or something.
Although the prequels are trash, and if you say there's anything remotely redeemable about them, I am. This guy's telling me like Jar Jar was better than Force Awakens, and I got a little offended. I'm like, what? That's objectively wrong. That's just
there
not
was
a fact.
one good thing about the prequels, because the first one had those pod racers, and that had very good sound mixing.
Yeah,
the only positive out of the entire trilogy.
I did love the pod. Yeah, I love the pod race. I love the asteroids in part 2. The with the big bomb that had like a silence before it went like boom, and it like cut all the asteroids in half. But part 3, there was nothing. The third one, so I agree. The pod races
revive the franchise. They should reintroduce some kind of Death Star. I don't think they've explored that enough.
Yeah, they just need to get it right. They're too easy to access and blow up. So let's go back to that well.
Yeah.
Well, you guys can do a Star Wars episode.
Yeah, look, we just offended Ethan just
I'll
even
leave.
going this far down that.
I'm going to lay down. I'm going to have a die-in.
This far down that. Yeah,
Can't
get your
see you
rainbow
now.
flag on you, Chick-fil-A. There's one. There's all these people with die-ins. There's one guy with a little rainbow card on his chest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Gotta have the rainbow.
good job, little man. And In and Out, like progressives love In and Out, and they put like scriptures on the bottom of
Exactly.
their wrappers. They're way more Jesus burger.
They're
than
open on
Chick-fil-A
Sunday,
is
though.
Jesus chicken.
They're not real Christians. They're open on Sunday.
All right, John, you're a pro, so why don't you talk us out? You can give our big outro.
Big outro. Here's where in my podcast I recommend music, and my taste in music is incredibly great. I will confess to that.
Oh man.
Yeah, but I don't know. What I say is listen to some early New Order, their first couple albums.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So early New Order, I kind of love that in-between period where they're not Joy Division anymore, but they're trying to figure out who they are. It's kind of a nice mix of new wave and post-punk, and it's the best. So I highly recommend you listen to some early New Order today. It'll make your weekend much better.
Can you thank yourself for joining us today?
Yeah.
Since you're doing the outro.
Thanks,
Gosh,
John.
John, thank
And
you.
tell people how to find you on the internet.
Yeah, it's hard to find words for how inspiring that was, but thank you, John. Thanks.
Are you
to
at
these
John
two
Gabriel
guys,
Jon?
Evan and Don? You did your part as well, but yeah, you can find me at ricochet.com. Please check us out. We have a lot of podcasts, but also writing as well. And I'm also on Twitter at xjon, EXJON. And I've been listening to this since episode 1. It's a fantastic podcast. And subscribe to this damn podcast and give it 5 stars, you lazy people.
Yeah, get in there. Help us out for once.
And I'll put all that info in the show notes for all you people who didn't write it down. So
We
there
dig
you
it.
go.
Thank you, John.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, John.
This has been on behalf of Ethan and the non-existent Mike Nelson, who is still in rehab. When he comes back out, he'll hit the ground running. And I'm Doug TeNapel. This has been Audio Mullet.